Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you what is the outliner and the properties editor. In the outliner you will see everything that's on the scene, the objects, the characters, lights, cameras, references, etc. From here you can select them easily, and it's very useful when you need to clean your scene, since you can hide and delete anything from here. For example, when you bring your characters to the scene, many times they will appear with their own camera, lights, and other items you don't need. So, to keep the scene clean, you can remove them or hide them by deactivating the eyes on the right. Down below we have the properties editor. The properties editor has many options, but the one we'll use when animating will be this bone icon called bone. The first thing we can see is the name of the control we have selected or the last control selected. Below we'll see the exact values of the three axes of location, rotation, and scale. And as you can see, they will update as we modify the controls. But if we want, we can modify them manually by writing the exact number or by left clicking and dragging until where we want. On the right we can see some logs icons. With them we can block the axis so it cannot be modified. And next to it we can see a rhombus or a point. The rhombus means that there is a keyframe set on that axis on the frame you're on. And the point or an empty rhombus means that there isn't a keyframe. And if we do a left click on it, it will set it or remove it. And don't worry about the points in the middle, because we won't use them. And finally, if we want, we can hide these two panels and open the properties editor floating panel, which has the same function as explained before, but takes up much less screen space. That's it for now. See you on the next class. Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you what is the breakdowner and how useful it is to animate faster. The breakdowner allows you to create a keyframe with values that are between the previous and the next pose. For example, if we have a ball that goes from point A to point B, and we want to create a keyframe where the ball is in the middle of its movement, we'll go to the frame where we want to create the keyframe, select the controls that you want to modify, and go to Pose, In-Betweens, and select Pose Breakdowner. As you can see, the mouse arrow becomes a double arrow. Now we can decide if we want to favor one pose or another. Moving the mouse to the right will get the controls value closer to the next pose, and moving the mouse to the left will get them closer to the previous pose. And finally, to key it, just do a left click. If we wanted to create a pose exactly between the two, just do a left click without moving the mouse as soon as you click on Pose Breakdowner. This tool will allow you to create breakdowns much quicker, and will help you animate in a cleaner way, since it will prevent you from making many mistakes, such as using the wrong control or over-rotating them, therefore ensuring that the transition between the poses will be smooth. And that's it. See you on the next class. Hi, in this class I'm gonna teach you the difference between IK and FK. There are two types of settings to pose your characters. Each mode has its advantages and disadvantages, so you will use one or the other depending on what you have to animate. FK or forward kinematics means that each joint will have a control, which you can rotate but not move, and it will affect the position of all the controls down the chain. The advantage of this modality is that it's much easier to create good visual arcs, since joints rotate from a pivot point, so it will organically create arcs. Also, it will reduce the number of pops that can appear on the joints, because as long as your graph editor curves are clean, the movements of the FK controls will be smooth. And on the other hand, we have IK, or inverse kinematics, which means that you can move the controls wherever you want, by establishing the exact position of the last control of the chain, and being the joints the ones that adapt to the movement. The advantage of this modality is that it allows you to move the control to a specific point, and no, that doesn't matter what you move in the rest of the body, as the control will remain in the same position, which is essential when your character is interacting with the environment, either by touching the ground with the feet or by grabbing or pushing something. The disadvantages of this modality is that it creates more pops, and you should pay more attention to make sure they move in arcs, since by default the interpolation created by Blender will be a straight line. So basically you almost always want to have the arms in FK, unless they interact with the environment. And almost always you want to have the legs in IK, since we'll need to maintain the foot planted without sliding most of the time. Okay, now you know the difference between FK and IK. So see you on the next class. Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you all the lights you have to illuminate your scene. To render your scene, first you'll have to create lights, and there are 4 types: point, sun, spot, and area. Point will create an omnidirectional light, which will illuminate in all directions. Sun will create a light replicating what the sun would do. With spot, you can focus the light on a certain point. And with area, you can also direct the light to a certain point, but this one is designed for big areas. Moreover, you can see that the 4 types of lights have several configuration options, such as the color of the light and its power. But keep in mind that depending on the type of light you have selected, it will need a different amount of power to generate a similar lighting. Next, the specular option allows you to adjust the glitters that the light will create. But also, depending on the light you have created, you'll have additional options. In point, you have radius, which will determine how far the light will propagate and dissipate. The smaller the number, the brighter the light will be. And the bigger it is, the more it will fade out. On sun, you have the angle option, which will determine the size of the sun. Therefore, it will affect the quantity of size that will be illuminated in the objects of the scene. And we can also establish the place and the angle from where the light is coming with this small ball. Spot also has the radius modifier, but moreover you can modify its size, which will allow you to increase and reduce the area that the light illuminates. And in blend we can establish the degree of blurring on the edges of the light. In area you have the option to modify the length and shape of the light bulb. And additionally, with spot, point and area in the custom distance box, you can set the size of the area where the light will propagate. In other words, the limit where the light will not illuminate at all. And finally, you can decide if the light will create shadow or not by activating or deactivating this little box. That's it, now you have a basic understanding on the lights of Blender. So see you on the next class. Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you an example of a picker that I created. I recommend that before you start animating a new character, you experiment a little with its controls to see what each one does and their limitations. Okay, so the white buttons are the arms and legs configuration controls. In the first option you can configure the FK controls to be independent of the body rotations. 0 means that they will rotate with the torso, and 1 that they will remain independent. Also, you can choose if you'll animate it with IK or FK, 0 being IK and 1 being FK. And if you choose IK, here you can set the maximum stretching level that the limb can have. On the AK space switch option, or in this character called root parent, you will determine if the AK controls will move together with the central control or will remain in the same place. But almost every time you use IK, you will want to set this option to 0, so the IK controls only move when you move them. And of course, keep in mind that depending on the character you are using, the names of these controls may vary. The blue buttons are the legs and arms FK controls. And the red ones are the IK controls, of which there are 2 for the hands, 2 for the legs, 2 to set the orientation of the elbows, 2 to set the orientation of the knees, and 2 for the special rotations of both feet, which are designed to animate the rotations of the feet when they are touching the ground. But make sure that you don't rotate the same axis with the normal rotations and the special rotations at the same time, as the special rotations will change the pivot point of the general rotations, making it much harder to animate and polish. The green controls are the universal ones. These can be used regardless of the configuration that you have. They are the head, the neck, the shoulders, the torso, the central control, the hips, the fingers of the hands, and the toes. If we go to the central control, we'll see that 2 extra options appear, head follow and neck follow. With these we can determine if the head and neck follow the torso rotations or maintain their individual rotations. 0 meaning that they remain independent, and 1 that they will rotate with the torso. The grey buttons are the polishing controls, which you will only use when you have almost finished your animations to make small adjustments, correct pops, or arc body parts. And finally, the black control below is the positioning control, which you will only use to position and orient your character before you start animating it, but you'll never create any animation on this control. Another very important thing to keep in mind is that when you are using several characters and you want to select a control from another picker, before selecting the other control, make sure to first left click on the viewport to deselect everything. Because, for example, if you have selected one control of this rig and you want to select a control of the other one, the previous control will not be deselected, so any action you make would affect both controls. And that's it for now. See you on the next class. Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you how to install and configure the Expose Picker. The picker is an essential tool to be fast animating, since you will be able to select the control you want without needing to have it visible on the viewport. This will give you a much cleaner view of your character and allow you to select the controls much quicker. Once you have downloaded it, to install it, we'll go to Edit, Preferences, and in the Add-ons section we'll click on Install. Next, we'll go to the folder where we have the zip file, and once selected, we'll click on Install Add-on. Now we will write Picker in the search box and make sure the picker is activated. As you can see now in the floating panel, it will appear a new section called Expose Picker. Open it, click on Picker Start, open the drop-down panel called Host Preferences, and activate the option Gizmos on Transforms. And remember that you'll have to check this box every time you create a new Blender file. Now we only have to open the picker of the character that we're going to use and start animating. To use it, every time you want to select a control, you must select the tool you want to use, so that it appears over the joint that you're going to modify. That's why it is essential that you use the hotkeys W, E, and R to select the tools quickly. If you are using another character and you want to have multiple pickers open at the same time, just go to File, Append tab, select and open the picker you want to use, click on Untitled and click OK. You also have the option to keep it at the front of the screen, or let it go into the background by turning on and off the pushpin icon. If you want to create a new picker, firstly you'll have to create an image of the character, either by taking a screenshot or rendering an image. Import it to the picker using this icon. Then select one of its controls and click on Set Namespace so that the picker links with the rig. Now just select the controls one by one, right click on the picker and left click on Add One button. Below you can set the color, size and name of the button. And if you want to change the position of an already created button, hold Ctrl plus left click on it to move it. Now just have to save it wherever you want, and that's it, your picker is done. Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you how to create constraints for animation. The constraints are essential when you have to animate your character interacting with other objects in the scene, since it will unite them and make them move together, but giving you the possibility to separate them whenever you want. Please note that to create a constraint we must have the controls of the rig visible. In this case we're going to constrain the mob to the FK controls of the arm. So first place the object on the part of the character where you want to constrain it. So in this case we want the character to move the mob, so we will select its main control, and in the properties editor we'll go to the bone constraints section, click on the drop down menu and select child of. Now in the target section we must establish where we want this control to be constrained to, so we will select the name of our rig. Next we have to set which part of the character's body exactly we want it to be constrained to. In this case I want it to be the right hand, so I'll write hand. As you can see we have several options, which have an R or an L at the end. R means right and L means left, so there are several options that could work, but since we're animating the arm with FK, we'll go simple and save and select the option hand FK R. As you can see the mob has moved elsewhere, so we'll have to click on Set Inverse so that it returns to its position. Below in the influence bar we can establish the degree of influence that the hand will have over the mob, but normally we always want to have it at maximum. As you can see with this configuration any movement of the hand will move the mob. But you can continue animating the mob individually so you can make small modifications easily. But if we wanted the object to determine the position of the hand, we'll have to create the constraint in the hand. But to make the constraint this way, we'll need to have the arm set to IK, since as you already know, the FK mode does not allow determining the position of the hand, but instead the angle of rotation of each joint. If we want to eliminate the constraint, we'll do it by clicking on this X. But if we just want to deactivate it, we'll do it with this I, with which we can activate it and deactivate it on any frame. This way, if for example the character were to throw an object and pick it up again, I would deactivate the constraint in the frame I want the character to release the object, and activate it again in the frame I want him to grab it. To do this, we'll go to the frame where we want the constraint to be activated. Place the mouse over the small eye and press S to create a keyframe on it. Now we'll go to the frame where we want the constraint to be deactivated and click on the eye to set a keyframe to deactivate it. However, there is one thing that you should keep in mind. In the frame where you deactivate the constraint control will go back to its original position. So we'll have to relocate it, which is not very difficult, just a minor inconvenience. And if for any reason you need to change the frame in which the constraint is activated or deactivated, you will see that as soon as we create a keyframe on the small eye, in the graph editor a new curve called Disable Child Off will appear, which although we can move up and down indefinitely, it will only recognize two values, below 0 meaning deactivated and above 1 meaning activated. Okay, so if for example we wanted the character to take off his cap, we would just need to create another constraint where the cap is constrained to the hand, thus creating two constraints, one to the head and the other one to the hand, and keyframe them so that when one is activated, the other one is deactivated. And when the object is in the air, both of them are deactivated. It's very important that you make sure that you never have two constraints activated at the same time for the same control, because it wouldn't know where to go. This method is ideal when you want to glue accessories to your character or make simple constraints, since it has its limitations. So to make more complex constraints, you'll have to use the next method. Imagine that we want the character to move the mop with both hands. And since we want the hands and the mop to have the freedom to move individually, we'll need a third control that moves the hands and the mop together in such a way that there is not a direct constraint between the others. Keep in mind that for this method you will also need to have the arms in IK. So firstly we'll go to Object Mode, create an armature and press F to frame it. As you can see, it has a bigger side and a thinner side. The ball on the big side will be its pivot. So depending on what you want to animate and how it will rotate, you'll have to place the armature accordingly. And if you need to modify its size, go ahead and scale it. In this case, after analyzing how the mop moves in my reference, I think that to have a good control over the movements, the pivot should be on the tip of the stick. Now we'll select the mop, the character and the armature and change everything to pose mode. Next, I'll select the mop's main control and constrain it to the armature. We could write its name as in the previous example. Or we can also use the tool on the right, which is used to select the target on the viewport. And in the section below, we'll select the only option available called Bone. And as before, to reposition it, click on Set Inverse. Now we'll do the same with both hands, and done. We have created the constraints. As you can see, we can rotate both hands and the mop individually, or all together with the armature. Lastly, to make things easier and cleaner, we'll create a new picker for this armature, so we can animate it without having to continuously hide and unhide all the controls. And remember to click on Set Namespace before creating the picker, otherwise it won't work. But what if instead of a mob is a box and I want it to be attached to the chest or hips of the character? Right now with this configuration we would have to go frame by frame making sure that the box doesn't get into the character's body, but is always barely touching it. To solve this, we'll just have to create a constraint on the armature to which the hands and the box are already constrained, and constrain this armature to the chest or any other parts we want it to be attached to. Done, the box will now move with the chest as long as it has this constraint activated. Okay, so now you know how to do constraints. So see you next class.